I'm Sarah Colvin, and joining me live on the phone, I welcome Natural Resource Officer Chris Nappi. Chris, good morning.
Good morning. How you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you?
Good.
So a little wild out there at Sandy Neck these days. I want to start by talking a little bit about some seabird strandings. I've heard there's been a number of strandings out there. Tell me a little bit about these birds and what's going on.
Yeah. So since we've had such a high number of storms over the past few weeks, we're getting some really rare birds to these areas, or birds that we just don't really see that often in such high numbers, actually. And one of the most common ones that we've been finding is called the thick-billed murre. And these birds they're really cool. They're small. They almost look like a cross between a penguin and a seagull. And they live out in the open ocean about 90% of the time. They really only come to land, or they're only supposed to come to land to breed. And they usually do that kind of way up in the Arctic, and they come down here in the winter time. But these storms that are relentlessly coming out of the north are just blowing them right on shore. So we've been seeing quite a few of them.
Absolutely, and really just kind of amazing to see. We're showing some pictures that Donna Bragg had sent us of the birds and of you guys rescuing them, and definitely looks like some pretty interesting conditions out there. So I mean, talk to me a little bit about how you kind of differentiate between a bird that is stranded and a bird that is just, you know, kind of on the shore. Is it unusual, as you said, it's unusual to see them on Sandy Neck, so is that just the indication that you know they might be in a little bit of distress?
Yeah. So, you know, these birds, we don't see them around very often, like I said. So when you see one, and we can walk pretty much right up to them. They don't try and fly away. We know that there's something wrong with them. You know, usually a wild animal is not going to really let you approach it unless there's something wrong. So that's a really good indication. And since these birds are out in the water all the time, they don't have the ability to take off from land. So when they can only fly if they're out over the water. They need that kind of running start, and they use their feet to kick, and they're able to fly then. So if they're on land, then they're in real trouble, and they can't take off. And you know, we've been finding them not just on the beach. We find them off of 149. We find them off of 28. We've been finding them on Race Lane, and they're alive. But they're just really tired. They're exhausted. They've been flying a long time, and they're just kind of plopping down wherever they can. And, you know, that's when they get in trouble. And, you know, I didn't really know that much about these birds. I knew what they were, but, you know, since we've been getting so many of them, I've been researching them, and they're actually really extraordinary birds with what they do and where they come from and where they fly and their ability. Because they're small, they're only about the size of, say, like a pigeon. They're really small, and they have black heads and necks and wings, and they're white underneath. But they live out in the water, and they swim. They dive down. They kind of fly underwater to forage for food, but they can dive down up to 490 feet.
Wow.
Yeah. So they're this little tiny bird that dives almost 500 feet down to catch their food, and they're so small. They live in such kind of volatile environments, stormy areas, and they use more energy than any other bird when they're flying. So these are really strong, resilient birds. So when we find them, you know, they're in some trouble.
Absolutely, and really kind of amazing if you think about a bird that's out in the open ocean and you're finding them, you know, as far inland as Route 149 and Route 28 and Race Lane, you know,
Yeah.
and they've flown all the way out there. And then, as you said, they can't take off from land. Definitely must be a scary experience for those birds. So talk to me a little bit about what you guys are doing with the birds once you find them. Like, say you find one of these birds on Race Lane, it's still alive. What's the next step?
Well, for the general public out there, we want them to call us, let us come out there and capture the bird. You know, any type of wild animal, that's the first step anybody should do if they encounter wild animals, especially, you know, birds like this. And what we do is we take them to a rehab facility. So we'll take them to Cape Wildlife in Yarmouth, or we'll take them to Wild Care out in Orleans, Eastham area, and they can rehab them. They can, you know, give them a health assessment. If they're dehydrated, get fluids in them, and, you know, get them in water. A lot of the birds, their feather, their coating. They've lost the waterproofing on their feathers, so they can't float in the water as well as they should be able to. So those people will give them the care that they need, clean their feathers, and get them ready to be released again. So they require that kind of specific care. So that's where we take them. And some of these places, they've been getting inundated with birds that people are bringing in there from all around the Cape. So there's they're kind of almost at capacity for housing these types of birds. So it's important that you get them to us first, and we'll put them in the place or we'll bring them to the place that they need to be.
Chris, any indications right now as to why the number of birds are stranding? Is it just simply the characteristics of the weather and the storms that we've been having lately?
Yeah, I think it's just the storms over the past 3 weeks. They've been, every couple days, and since these birds are so small, they use so much energy when they're trying to fly, they're just getting really tired. So when we pick them up, we can actually feel, how healthy they are by how much kind of meat they have on their bones. You can actually feel them and give them kind of a grade with how they feel and how much bone you can feel, and these guys are pretty low. They get pretty poor grades. So when we find them, so that's just kind of a test at how much they've been going through over the past few weeks of the stormy weather.
Great. Well, really interesting to hear about this. It's always cool to kind of learn about new animals that we don't see that often. Certainly must be fascinating for you guys as well to get to see up close something that is usually so far out to sea.
Yeah, it's really cool. And we're at the very southern end of their range in the wintertime. This is about their limit. Sometimes people have been finding them further south, but it's really rare for us to get this many of them during the winter.
Indeed. A couple more things I wanted to talk about before we run out of time. Beach conditions, just briefly. I know that Donna's also sent us some pictures of a lot of ice, a lot of icebergs. What is it like out there on the beach these days?
Yeah, so that's the cold weather. It's been freezing. It's starting to freeze the bay and the harbor, and it's forming like this kind of slush out along the beach, and that slushy water, and it forms like ice chunks too. It's starting to pile, the waves are starting to pile that slush and ice chunks up on the beach and forming almost like a seawall out of ice that runs the length of the beach. And in some spots, that wall of ice is, taller than me, over 6 feet tall. So it's really quite a sight to see, and if you guys have time. The beach isn't open. These conditions make it really treacherous to drive on. It's really difficult for us to get in and out of there. So, you won't be able to drive out there, but if you can come down to the beach, park in the parking lot, and hike out, it's really cool to see.
Yeah, I would love to check that out. Chris, one more thing we want to talk about is some dune replacement, some sand placement in the next few weeks that you're hoping to do, about 2,600 cubic yards. Talk to me a little bit about that, and I would assume that you're probably going to have to wait until conditions are a little bit more ideal.
Yeah, well, the idea is that sand's going to be put in as quick as possible. The last time I talked to you a couple weeks ago, we had a restoration project with those shims. Those washed away about 3 days after we talked on that big blizzard. But now that all of that sand that was placed there, we lost a good amount of it during that storm, and it's kind of an emergency. We need to put more sand up to protect the parking lot again. So that's going to be in the lower parking lot now, so that the bigger area is kind of vulnerable at this time.
Absolutely, and we're expecting some pretty heavy winds and a little bit of a storm coming through this weekend. I'm still kind of watching the forecast. Are there concerns that there could be some more erosion with the weather that's anticipated this weekend? Yeah,
just about any storm that's coming through, there's concern. So we just have to, we worry about high tides. So this weekend the tides are fairly high. So we'll just kind of see how the storm plays out over time, and we'll just kind of see what happens. It's a waiting game. So.
Indeed, and again, how soon are you hoping to get that sand in there? Is that as soon as possible? Is there a kind of a timeline on that you would like to get it done, or is it just as soon as you get the funding in?
It's as soon as possible. So the wheels are turning. So we hope within a week and a half or so.
Excellent. Well, Chris, I thank you so much, as always, for joining us here on Barnstable this morning. A pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you.
And stay safe out there, and we'll talk with you again sometime soon.
Okay, great. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Chris Nappi is a natural resource officer out on Sandy Neck here in the town of Barnstable. Really cool, and just to see those pictures.
Those pictures are amazing.
It doesn't it look like Antarctica?
Yes.